Hi there. Coming to you from the kitchen dining room area again. My office is in a state of disarray at the moment because, much like the Canadian government, we are currently going through a cabinet shuffle. Only in our case, it means that we have a cabinet upstairs that's going to go downstairs, and one downstairs that's going to come upstairs, and as a result, everything's gotten moved around. Mind you, I do find that the lighting here, given the fact that I have some natural light and some overhead lights that are quite bright, turns out to be not that bad for these videos. Anyhow, today's topic is one that nobody asked for. It's kind of one that most people take for granted without stopping to maybe think about it. But when I look on things like buy and sell sites, I notice a lot of the questions by a lot of the people about cameras and lenses and so on shows that there isn't a clear understanding of lens mounts. Now, I don't intend to go through every possible lens mount, but if you look at what is currently available, it breaks down something like this. Now I'm going to start with the big two. Canon abandoned manual focus lenses back in the late 80s. So the older Canon lenses, the old FD and before that lenses may be fine if you're going to be adapting them to a mirrorless system. But other than that, they are basically obsolete. If you have some, don't throw them away. But remember, it does mean having to adapt them, and they are manual focus and so on. However, when they brought out their EOS system, their electronic optical system, they went with autofocus lenses that had motors in the lens right from day one. The result is that all of their lenses should be able to still function on at least some of their modern bodies. Now, there are a couple of caveats there. First of all, in their wisdom, Canon decided that they would basically separate their full-frame people from their crop sensor people. So all of their low-end crop sensor lenses labeled EFS, because of their design, even though the mount is the same, they will not fit on most full-frame cameras. So if you have EFS lenses and you plan on going full-frame, you will probably have to replace them. EF lenses work on all of their cameras. That's why all of the old film lenses that I spoke of, the early EOS lenses, will work on pretty much all of the current digital SLR models from Canon. So that's the only real caveat when it comes to Canon. EFS, not full frame. EF works on everything. Let's move on to Nikon. Nikon made a big deal about how they haven't changed their lens mount since it was originally designed in 1959. That's kind of a creative piece of incomplete information. I'm trying hard not to use the L word because basically it doesn't work. Their earlier lenses, because of variations in the way in which they transferred information to those early camera bodies, have bits and pieces on them that would make them not work on later cameras. And once they got into autofocus, they started making some rather major changes because they started with autofocus motor in the body. So there was a little pin, a little screw drive that drove the focus in the lens. Those lenses are AF or AFD lenses. AF or AFD lenses will not autofocus on the modern entry-level Nikons. I'm talking about the D3000 and whatever series, the D5000 and whatever series, and some of the earlier models like the D40 and so on. They will work on, I think, the D7000 and whatever, and I believe, now you may correct me there, I'm not sure about the D610, but I know that they will work on all of the other full-frame Nikon cameras. So if it says AF or AFD and you've got your nice shiny new, D5500, be warned, it's not going to autofocus. Secondly, we have the DX versus FX. Now, unlike Canon, Nikon will allow you to mount their DX, which is crop sensor, their DX lens onto their FX, which is full frame body. They will mount, and most of the cameras have a crop mode, which will allow you to not have the vignetting. So you do have the option of using them, but remember that their functionality is rather limited. If you take a 36 megapixel, D810, and you put it in crop mode, you've dropped that down to probably only around. Now, please, I haven't done the math on this, but somewhere around 20 megapixels or less, which means that it's actually less resolution than a 24 megapixel D7000 and whatever. So be warned. All right, that takes care of the big two. We'll move on now to some of the lesser used mounts. All right, before we get into the mirrorless systems, let's take a look at the other two, and I think there are just two right now, the other two digital SLR mount systems that are still being used. First, we have the Sony. Now, some people have caused a little bit of confusion over the Sony mount because Sony has played around with sensor size and things like that quite a bit in the last few years. But basically, the digital SLR body Sonys started out using the Minolta Maxim AF mount. That's because Minolta was the first on the block with in-body autofocus in a DSLR. They used a screw mount system, a screw drive system, to run the autofocus in the lens from a motor in the camera body. Anyhow, Minolta, of course, over the years ran into some difficulty. There were some patent issues over that autofocus system, which cost them a lot of money, and there were some mistakes in the way they did things. There was a partnership with Konica that didn't really help the photographic side of things, and finally they sold off their entire photography section to Sony, who were looking to get into cameras beyond the simple point and shoots that they were building up to that point. Anyhow, the result is that we have that autofocus mount, that AF mount. What did Sony do to change it? Very little. They brought out a series of crop sensor lenses. I believe they're labeled DT. Please check to be sure. They will mount on all of the bodies, no big deal. Some of their lenses have motors now in the lens, so there are both systems available. From what I understand, and again, you're going to have to research this on your own because I don't have all the details on Sony. From what I understand, the lenses will work on all the camera bodies, all of their, I believe that all of their digital SLRs and their digital SLT cameras, I think they all still have a motor in the camera to drive the autofocus. But please, if you're looking at an entry-level model, check and make sure. Here I have an older model. I think it's a D3. It's the 330, and this Alpha 330 uses the screw drive, and I have some old Minolta Maxim lenses, the Minolta Maxim were good quality lenses, a bit heavy, a bit clunky, a bit slow to autofocus, but good optical quality. I have a few of those to work with that system, as well as one of Sony's DT lenses. Alright, so that takes care of the SLR SLT side of Sony. I'm not going to get into the mirrorless right now. Moving on, the last one that I'm going to speak about today is Pentax. Pentax is the mount system that I personally use. On the positive side, okay, on the plus side, Pentax has kept the same mount, just as Nikon kept the same physical mount. Pentax has kept a little bit more compatibility than Nikon have. For instance, any of the bayonet mount, the K-mount lenses, regardless of how far back they go, can meter on a modern Pentax body. The autofocus, of course, is only there if it's an autofocus lens. The old manual focus lenses obviously will focus manually. And before they put in the automatic aperture setting on their lenses, of course you had to set the aperture manually. So you do have to go through an extra step of manual metering in order to be able to use them. Not a big deal. Meanwhile, as you get into the autofocus lenses, the first series were the F lenses. The second series are the FA lenses. And then we get the DA lenses, which are crop sensor. Then you get the DFA lenses, which are digitally are designed for digital but are full frame. Now, what does this design for digital mean? Well, basically, it's just a change in the way the coatings are done. With a film camera, film didn't reflect a tremendous amount of light. So when you took a picture, there wasn't much light reflecting back from the film onto the rear elements of the lens. However, digital sensors are quite shiny. The result is there is this light reflecting back. Older lenses didn't necessarily have the rear elements coated to reduce reflection like that. So sometimes they will show a little ghosting or a little flare because of light reflecting back from the sensor. As a result, digitally optimized lenses have coatings on those rear elements as well to prevent that from occurring. So that's the biggest difference between a film lens and a digital lens. All right, folks, that takes care of the digital SLR side of interchangeable lens mounts. We'll move on now to mirrorless cameras and what little I can give you in that particular area. If you enjoyed this video, please click like. If you would like to see more, click subscribe. And of course, if you think that anybody might get some benefit from this in sifting through the confusion of lens mounts, then click share. I apologize for the length of this video, but there was a lot to cover and I wanted to get it over and done with in one video. So thank you very much. Bye for now.